G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 4 of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Blum. We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care, salty products for sore fuckers.
G'day! Welcome back to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Blum. Today's special guest is former 2nd Commando Regiment Warrant Officer, retired Ant Plater. Ant served for 27 years in the Australian Defence Force, 17 of those years in the 2nd Commando Regiment. And he has joined us today to talk about his deployments and his life after service. Hi, Ant. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, Adam. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I can't wait to dive into some juicy conversations.
No, mate, it's an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on. And I've been wanting to have you on for a while. And it's actually great to come to your house and actually sit down with you face to face and record with you. And yeah, mate, it's great to be here. And so, mate, before we get into your journey of your 27 years and 17 years in Special Forces, let's go back to a young Ant and tell us a little bit about you as growing up. Where did you grow up, and what was what was life like, and what was school like, and any hobbies that you had?
Yeah, I was born in Griffith in central New South Wales. Didn't really spend a lot of time there. Family quickly moved to Sydney. Was in Sydney for about until up to the age of 6 and 7, and then moved to Tasmania. So first went to school in Sydney. I think it was grade 1 or preschool, and then a couple of years of schooling in Tasmania. My parents at the time, both chefs. We went on a working holiday. So we spent some time in Perth. We spent some time in Katherine in the Northern Territory, about 3 to 4 years, which for me, like growing up in those young years, living in Katherine in the Northern Territory, a bit of time in Darwin, a bit of time in Tennant Creek. It was amazing, like just exploring and, riding everywhere, mates and fishing and all that sort of stuff. So that was pretty cool. Finished off my schooling in Wollongong, and pretty much I actually joined the army from the Gong, yeah. So
with the military side of things, did you have any family that had served before you decided to join the military, and what was the driving factor for you to actually enlist in the army?
Yeah, I did have an uncle who was he was in 3RR. He was a veteran of Korea, Malaya, Borneo, Vietnam. He got out as a Warrant Class 1 in about the early 80s, I think, from memory. About 85, mid 80s. So yeah, his influence, I guess, had a big part on me wanting to join the military. Just seeing photos from his time in service and being in and around Don. Was probably the biggest influence. My father spent some time in the army as well, and did his trade, started his chef's apprenticeship in the army, and then got out and finished the course. So, and then he did some stuff in the Army Reserve. But I would say the main influence was my Uncle Don.
And so you were 17 when you joined. So
I was I just turned 17 like 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. I'm on the bus to Kapuka, so I was a kid.
What was that like? And especially because you joined in 88?
88, October 88.
So no political correctness back then. What was it like going as a young 17-year-old to Kapuka, and what are your memories of basic training?
Yeah, it was confronting. I mean, everyone talks about, the bus trip to Kapuka and everyone's quiet, and then there's that little bit of energy as you drive through the gates at Kapuka, and the military police or whatever, artillery instructor comes on the bus, and it's game on from that moment. Like it's silence, and then he's just ripping into you for the smallest things. And it was, we talk about the shock of capture.
Yeah.
we were literally rabbits in the headlights. Like, you've got this massive, 30 kilo suitcase and you're trying to march down the street. You've got 6 or 7 instructors circling sharks who are just ripping into you. Classic shock of capture. It was on.
So, and for you, were you always going down the infantry sort of path? That was where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I think so. Again, mainly seeing the experiences that my uncle Don had been through: Korea, Malaya, Borneo, Vietnam, and then his time sort of post that. I don't remember having any other thoughts of any other job. I just wanted to get through recruit training, survive it, and get to infantry and get amongst it.
So you pass out at Kapooka, and you head to your initial employment training, so up at Singleton.
Yep.
And what do you remember of that? Like, Kapooka was in your face. What was Singleton like? Was that a whole nother level? Or?
Yeah, so I think I marched out of Kapooka, it was like December. And then, actually, I think it was January, because they held us back at Kapooka until like 2 weeks into January. Then we were transported up to the School of Infantry at Singleton in the Hunter Valley. And then we had like about another sort of 3 or 4 weeks whilst we were waiting for all the platoon to get there so we could start our training. By that time I just wanted more. Like, I loved everything that we were getting exposed to, and loved the weapon handling, and loved the mateship and the team building around me. I was just keen to get into it, to be honest.
Yeah, and then you finish your initial employment training, and then you posted to 1RAR. And
yeah.
What was that like when you got to 1RAR?
Crazy. I finished at the School of Infantry in May. It was actually it was about March. I think it was March or back end of April. Straight up to Townsville on a C-130, and middle of hot, just getting off the aircraft and getting smacked in the face, and by the heat, not by the soldiers, but it was just I remember those early days. You were just trying to survive. Like, if you did the wrong things, you were thrown around. The platoon sergeant, the section commanders are in your face. So I grew up pretty quickly. I was still 17 at this time. Going out on the town, getting into bars, various ways, and it was a peacetime army. Like, we came out of Vietnam in 1974, and it's 1989, and so there was a sprinkling of Vietnam sort of platoon sergeants and warrant officers around, but probably one or two. But the platoon sergeants and section commanders were relentless. Like, you did the wrong thing, you paid for it. And I wasn't. I got into a bit of trouble myself and spent some time on the parade ground.
As any young soldier does, mate.
That's it. Like, it's you got to push the limits. It's all about finding your boundaries and what you can and can't do. But no, it was a great time. Like, training, we played hard, we worked hard. Weekends in town. At the various bars and stuff in Townsville at the time, and it was just a good time and a great experience. Like, I had thirst for to get to other places very quickly, because I could see my career path was in the headlights, and I wanted it.
So during your time up at one, you deployed to Bougainville and also Somalia.
Yeah.
What did you take away from these two deployments? And did it help you going forward in your career?
Yeah. So there was about 3 or 4 years there from arriving to the battalion to when we went to Somalia, and I'd completed a couple of specialist courses, recon, sniper course, and then found myself just prior to going to Somalia, I was posted into internal posting into recon platoon. So it was just a great lifestyle. Like, we had guys who the top of the top in the battalion. They had we had a lot of guys doing SAS selection at the time, and being successful, and so it was a high performing environment with a lot of good NCOs, a lot of good soldiers. Most guys in the battalion had aspirations to get to the platoon, so we had that high performing era about us, I guess you could say.
So for you, it was cutting your teeth, like getting to become a good leader before you went on to special forces, and so you learning your craft. Essentially, like that was what you got out of that time.
100%. And deploying to Somalia, there'd been no Australian Army battalion level deployments since Vietnam. So 74, 93, almost 20 years of peacetime. So there was a lot of expectation of us, I guess, to get over there and get the job done. And, Somalia was complex, and, being a young patrol scout, I was supposed to be the patrol SIG, but I think it was 1 or 2 nights before we went, the boys were having a few quiet beers.
Yep.
And our patrol scout rolled his ankle, severely, doing some, pretty bad damage. So he couldn't go. And so I all of a sudden went from patrol SIG, which is generally the first position in terms of new guys coming into a patrol would sit, into patrol scout. So learning curve just went through the roof again. But I loved it. I had a great team, and we only just had a Somalia reunion just recently, a couple of months back now, and catching up with some of those guys from the patrol, and seeing where we're all at in life now it was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So Somalia, and then Bougainville, I was sort of on the back end of, like, I'd spent 3 years back in recon snipers as a patrol commander, and then Bougainville was an individual deployment as a corporal into a peace monitoring team off to Bougainville for just short of 6 months.
Yeah, right. And so you start to think you had your map marked out of you're going to head down special forces, and were you thinking SASR at first, and then how did you end up going for 2 Commando? For RAR Commando at that stage. I actually attempted SAS selection in 1996. Yeah, right.
And got deep into the course, and then I wasn't successful in selection to SAS for a couple of reasons. Again, I always had I had a recommendation to reattempt, but reflecting back now, and even 10, 15 years ago, I just wasn't prepared enough. My mindset, I was fit. I was only like 69 kilos, and I was carrying a 40 kilo pack most of the time. But I wasn't mentally prepared for what Special Forces selection throws at you. We always, most guys will prepare themselves physically, but they don't do enough mental preparation in terms of that self-motivation. Because on selection, it's, comms black. You don't get any positive feedback. You don't get any negative feedback. You just don't get any feedback. So you don't know if you're performing at the standard. You don't know if you're doing the right things. So the mind slowly snowballs into, what am I even doing here? I'm clearly not performing, even though you could be, but you don't know because there's no feedback. You've got to self-generate the positive mantra, this positive self-talk. Otherwise, you just spiral. And, in reflection, and even, since then, it's always ensured that I was, regardless of what I was doing, any course, any deployments, combat, always made sure I was mentally prepared, because I probably, left myself pretty short back then.
Because how old were you in 96? Like when you attempted SAS
I was 26.
Okay.
26.
Yeah. And then so you come back from that disappointment of not getting into SASR, and then mentally you start to prepare for RAR Commando. And at that stage, did you know what was like with the raising of the capability, what it was, and was there a lot of talk around it, or
there was sort of. So 97, I was a patrol commander in recon still, and I had another year, so 98, and then your general flow is once you've done those postings as a corporal internally to the battalion, you can either go to the School of Infantry as an instructor, or get invited to come down, or you can go to Recruit Training Battalion 1 RTB. So for me, there wasn't a lot of talk about 4R Commando or 2 Commando Regiment at the time. There was a couple of guys like Weston Hennessy, Bram, Mick Sloman, those types of guys were sort of, there was starting to be courses starting to be run down in Sydney, and I think H and a couple of other guys first did selection in 99 or 2000ish, might have been just before. So there wasn't a lot of talk. Like I still had aspirations to go and do SA selection again. Got to the end of 98, finished, just shy of nine great, shaped my lifetime, period of time in my life. I had great time, some great, operations, great training, sporting, personal life was pushing forward. And then I got posted to the School of Infantry. So 99, I love being at the School of Infantry. Like, not going back there. I went back there once in the Duke of Gloucester Cup as a corporal, which is like a inter-battalion, section competition. But I hadn't been back since, and I was just thriving. I had so much knowledge. I just wanted to impart on the men in my section that I was training in the platoon, and I just loved it. Like I really found a niche in terms of imparting my knowledge and wanting to be a good instructor, wanting to be a good leader. And I think, off the back of my time in the battalion as a infantry section commander, recon patrol commander, and then instructor at the School of Infantry, that was really the formative years of me understanding actually what leadership meant and how to be a good leader. Because you can go on all these promotion courses and you want to lead, but you're also under assessment. So as much as you want to do those things that are outside the box as a leader, there's that pressure on your shoulder that, hey, I get that, but I've still got to tick the boxes, make sure I'm getting all the assessments right.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's sort of leadership in the sense of being, there's some people lead by book and others lead by experience, and you were doing that. You were from the front leading and wanting and cutting your teeth in the battalion life set you up as a good leader going forward. Which is, and 100%. You sometimes lived experience is better than trying to read what a textbook says you should do. And I get exactly.
For me, like leadership, the sweet spot in leadership is about. I guess there's two types. There's those who lead by their actions and those who lead by the ability to communicate well. The sweet spot is somewhere in the middle. So if you can lead by your actions, plus you can communicate your intent, your battle plan, your plan, somewhere in the middle there's a sweet spot where you're taking a little bit from each. That's what leadership is about, because you've got to be able to lead by your actions. You've got to be able to lead, but you have to be able to communicate well as well. So finding that sweet spot, and that's what I found those last couple of years in the battalion, my time at the School of Infantry, where you've got platoon sergeants who are experienced in the battalion, and then up in the specialist wing at the spec wing at the School of Infantry, where they run all the subject to for corporal, sergeant, warrant officer, and you've got all these just off the back end of Vietnam level warrant officers. There's so much knowledge, and I meticulously studied a lot of these guys and getting their leadership styles and things I wanted to bring into my own leadership style. It's such a great environment for learning and for young NCOs to go to these instructional postings and just be a sponge.
Yeah.
like it's a unique environment. And I loved my 2 years, or it actually ended up being about 18 months at the School of Infantry.
Yeah, right. And then you find you go to selection. So
Yeah.
you go, and what do you remember about selection? And because at that stage you stayed a sergeant, you were one of the last courses to go through as with rank. Is that correct?
Yeah. And so they were myself and another lad, Mick Parent, were promoted and then went on selection. But the unit, I guess, 4RR at the time, 4R Commando, was posturing for East Timor.
Yep.
In 2001. So yeah, myself and Mick went to the unit. We had like into recon patrol commander positions as sergeants, and that was a challenging time because we were sort of outsiders coming into this unit that was restructuring. So you had all the old school Bravo guys. We've got this level of knowledge that the unit wants. We're trying to mould with the guys from old school Bravo. There's lots of Rios coming into the unit because we're posturing for Timor. It was a challenging time, and there was a number of leadership challenges that were thrown my way about, people, thinking the unit should be going in one direction, but we're posturing for East Timor. So we've taken one hat off a little bit. We still want to maintain that, but we've got this new hat, which is getting ready for Timor.
And what did you find? Because you obviously gone for selection in '96. What did you find the hardest part of selection when you were doing your selection process?
Yeah, so we did a 3-day barrier test where you do your physical, so your 3.2, your 2.4, your push-ups, pull-ups, all that sort of stuff, and then there's some psychological screening. There's first aid, there's comms, and there's a few other. There's a board interview. I knew I was fit enough. Like I'd always maintain a high level of fitness.
Yep.
But I had those doubts of what let me down on my mental preparation, in '96 in taking those forward into the new challenges. So, the selection throws so much problem solving at you, whether you're in a leadership position or whether you're, an operator in whatever team, you're just being watched 24/7. And the smallest things that you think you can take shortcuts on, the DS are onto you. Like, it was just relentless. My selection, we had so much rain. It was like we were living in the jungle. So environmental conditions, as well as the pressure of selection, the pressure of the directing staff, just, tearing you a new one because you'd done something wrong. The mind games they would play with us, we did like a whole day of infantry minor tactics, and then we got to the end of the day, and one of the directing staff has come out and said, "We've spent a whole day and I've been teaching you the wrong things. Righto, we're going to do it for the next 24 hours. We're going to overnight. We need to get this done by a certain time." And we're thinking, wow, like. So you quickly had to, it was just mind games. It was just mind games. So you quickly had to reset, positive self-talk, positive mantra, get your team around you, because, even though selection is an individual thing, you actually need to form teams strongly and quickly so you can survive. That adds to your ability to survive selection. If you've got good guys in your team, you'll generally get through at the end, mostly. So, yeah, like it's just all consuming, and it's one of the, if not the hardest thing I've probably done, is getting through selection at the time, and, reflecting back and, even crossing paths with guys I did selection on. We always joke and have a laugh of the hard times you went through, and, no one's done it as hard as us on selection. And, selection today is it's tenfold on what we were exposed to. But at the time, it's you're in the machine, you're in the mix. So it is what it is, you know.
And were you at that stage? Were you trying to be the grey man, sort of just go through, just get through? That was just pass and then get onto the Rio cycle, and
I guess there's an element of that. There's an element of not wanting to go against the grain, and there was some. There's certainly some young officers on my selection who they just didn't understand that aspect of. We're on selection, you know, it's not what it's like in the unit, and there's you're being tested on all fronts. You're being tested physically, mentally, and how you react to certain situations, how you react to success and failure.
And emotionally too.
And emotionally as well, right? So, you know, some of the officers found it hard, and again, some of the candidates found it hard to, when they were given feedback, how to take that feedback, you know, because constructive criticism, it's constructive.
No one likes it. But
exactly. People don't like being criticised in general, right?
Yep.
But when it's constructive, I'm actually trying to make you better. I'm actually trying to invest in you.
Yep.
So that was the grey man element, but some people did not take constructive criticism well, and they would fight and argue and justify and, no, I did this for this reason. It's just like,
dude, just
relax.
Yeah.
Just if they say the sky's pink today,
it's pink.
It's actually in fact pink, mate.
So, did you feel a bit of added pressure being a sergeant? And
absolutely,
and how did you cope with that? Like, how did you find ways to go, because you were being watched? And you trying to pass selection just as you as the person, and is trying to just get through. But then the added pressure of being a sergeant, how did you cope with that?
Yeah, so, you know, I was comfortable and confident with my ability as a junior leader. You know, I was just a junior senior NCO, but I was comfortable in my time as a patrol commander, you know, as a section commander back in the battalion, you know, all my instructional skills as an instructor at School of Infantry. You know, I'd built this, you know, resume of leadership, and, you know, I frothed over human performance and leadership and listening to experienced instructors. So that gave me this portfolio of confidence to take on selection as a junior NCO. And I was confident in my own abilities. But again, nothing prepares you for selection.
Yep.
And being told or taking that constructive criticism, or that criticism that, you know, that's thrown at you on selection, because they're testing your mindset. They're testing your mental ability to go through some hard times, come out the other end, and lead commandos in operations.
Because it's different, isn't it? From the battalion, like you now special force, it's a totally different element, totally different to battalion life.
Yeah.
And did you, like, seeing the difference in as you're talking about constructive criticism, did you see that, wow, I can see the difference between the battalion life to now this is special forces, and that you could see the difference? Yeah,
absolutely. So, you know, like, we're talking, you know, corporal sergeant level, the responsibilities you have in SF organisation, mind-blowing. You know, we're talking about sergeants leading room floor combat plans, whether it's in a TAG East environment or whether it's in a room floor combat mission or a direct action mission in Afghanistan.
Yep.
So the responsibilities on a corporal, you know, our team commanders and the structure we put around a commando platoon, a force element, the responsibilities are through the roof. So I could sense that straight away, but I actually thrived in that environment. Yeah. I didn't want to survive. I wanted to thrive. You know, and that's one of the things I tell a lot of people now is, you know, do those 1%ers, because that extra mile that we do in training or whatever, it can be a lonely place, because not many people want to take themselves there because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it can expose you as a man or a woman or a leader or a junior leader or whatever. But that's where the growth is, in that lonely last mile, where you're going to learn, hey, is Anne up to this? Well, yes, I am, because I've built this resume, this portfolio of leadership, of understanding it, and I knew what I had to do to get through selection. Yep. And I actually thrived in that environment. Whilst there was testing moments, there was no moment I felt overwhelmed. There was no moment of, this is not for me. There was no moment of, I'm not going to pass.
Yep.
It's just, what's my next job?
And
Where do I need to be? How's my team? We all good? Yeah, everyone's fed. Look after each other, boys. Yep, buddy aid, self-aid, all those check-ins that you do as a leader. So on selection, I think there was that expectation of myself and the other senior NCO who went on there, because we were being selected to go in as team commanders, not selected to go in as a junior operator.
And for you, so how long was selection for you when, because it's got longer now, but how long was your selection
it's
course?
pretty much the same. It's about 19 days.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You know, we always talk about give or take, 24, 48 hours, but it was about 19 days.
Yeah, right.
And like I went on, I think I weighed like 81 kilos or something, and I finished selection at about 71. So I was a shadow of myself.
Yeah, right. And did you, how many attempted the selection with you, and was it and how many finished?
Going back to the paper board, there was like probably 160 candidates, and then we started selection with about 75 from memory.
Yep.
And then we finished with 8 successful guys.
Wow.
Yeah,
So a high attrition rate.
Oh, attrition rate is massive. Like, again, as I said, it's such a furnace of an environment, because everything you do is being watched, notes are being taken. We call them speeding tickets.
Yep.
Everything has been, and you sit in your weekly debrief, or the directing staff will bring you in, and they've got this like dossier of information on you, and it's quite confronting, because I don't even remember that, but I may have done that wrong. Well, no, in fact, yes, I did do that wrong. Yeah. And you're just on receive for like an hour.
Yeah, right.
But there's lots of positive stuff to take away from that. Again, I'm sure some people didn't take that feedback well.
But you were thriving on it.
I just thrived. I love human performance, and I always, everything I've done since my military time, it's about me pushing me to see what Ant can handle.
Yeah.
As an athlete, pushing myself to my limits. I thrive in that environment.
So you pass selection, and what feeling was that? A great feeling, like getting to the end of that 19 days and then going on the Rio cycle, and like just a proud moment of that you'd performed well enough to
it's an interesting feeling, because being back in the battalion, and you see guys come back, and they've been successful on SAS selection, and whilst they haven't got their berets, they've come back to the unit to march out and go and do 12 or 18 months worth of Rio courses. I remember I was so exhausted at the time that I really didn't get to enjoy the moment. We came back from the field. We deserviced everything and anything that was needed to be. So it's like a full day, and guys are trickling in for their final interview. And I remember, like, out of everyone who finished, I think there was about 35 finished, or 35 or 25, I can't remember. It was about that number, and then 8 of us were successful. And I was like the second last guy to be interviewed. So it's just like you're waiting all day, and then you obviously have your final interview and told you you've been successful, welcome to the unit, blah blah blah. I was so exhausted mentally and physically. I didn't really celebrate and reflect on that moment until probably 2 or 3 weeks after.
Yeah, right.
To be honest, so it took me that period of time to recover, from selection.
Yeah.
Putting weight on, doing some recovery, like doing some fitness again, doing some rehabilitation, because you're tested. Everything you do on selection, you're physically and mentally tested. So you're fairly broken coming off selection.
Yep.
It's now, in the regiment now, they have a period of time of rehabilitation when you finish selection, 2 to 3, 4 weeks or whatever, where you're actually put through a rehab cycle, because you need to mend before you go on and do reinforcement cycle.
And so you did your Rio, and then finally you got your beret, and it's different now the way that your beret is given out to when you first joined the unit. And what company and did you go into?
So I was got my beret. I think in actual fact it's worth reflecting that I think my selection or the selection before us was the first where we went to sort of like a formal beret presentation.
Yeah, right, okay.
Because in the past it was just, you'd march into the SI, the senior instructor, and he'd shake your hand and give you a beret and you'd go off.
Yeah, right.
And then the CO actually presented us our berets, and the guy who's actually the Special Operations Commander now, Paul, he actually presented my beret to me. He was in one of those senior instructor commander training wing positions now, and I still have a really good relationship with Paul, and he's obviously in the senior seat in Special Operations Command at the moment. And that was an amazing. I had all the lads that would passed with us, and family was there, so it was a real achievement. And it's a real achievement, but it's a funny feeling because you know that you've still got getting through Rio and getting your beret, and a lot of guys don't realise this, it's just the start.
Yeah, right.
Like, we spoke about that daily renewable contract.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter how well I went on selection, that's irrelevant now. I've passed and I've got through my reinforcement, but you are literally just being reborn. Day one, here we go.
Yep.
Get your game face on, because at any moment, if you don't perform, you go through the appropriate counselling and you can be shown the door, because that's the level of responsibility we put on everyone who's an operator, through to the most junior guy, through to the most senior guy, to the regimental sergeant major. Yeah, there's an expectation that you got to turn up and do the job every day, foot on the throat type stuff. Otherwise, you'll be shown the door.
And so for you're now part of the regiment. You're in amongst it with Bravo Company is where you post into.
Yeah.
And where were you? Everyone knows where they were when September 11 happened. Yeah. Where were you? and did you foresee the future of that day would change your life and also the regiment's life, and then, well, the whole world's pretty well changed that day. But did you foresee that you would be fighting in the Middle East for almost 16, 17 years that you fought for into the future, or not at that stage?
So I was in East Timor, deployed with the battalion at the time, and as a recon patrol commander. 24 hours before 9/11, we were helicopter insertion down to the border between East Timor and Indonesia. It was pretty much our primary task is tactical control line, so the border.
Yep.
In the hills, observation posts, just monitoring on what's happening on the border and if there's any, border incursions, etc. So we had inserted and for I can't remember why, but for this particular patrol, the platoon sergeant came out with us. A guy by the name of Reece Stewart, which most of your listeners probably know. Very successful, commando, great operator. He was in my patrol at the time. And I remember sitting, on picket with Reece that night, and it seemed an unusually busy night of, watching satellites scoot across the sky. Whether that was coincidence or whether it was in reaction to what was unfolding, we had no idea. We still had another 36 hours in the field. We were extracted by Hilo about 36 hours later. We came back to our headquarters location, and the platoon commander sat us down and said, basically showed us some footage of what had happened. And as you can imagine, like, gobsmacked. Just trying to process what we could see in front of us. And he quickly basically said that, a number of lads are going to be, heading home to Australia. The government's, made some fairly hasty decisions on that. We need to form a tactical assault group that's going to be situated on the East Coast. We've got TAG West, which is based out of SASR in Perth. So the dynamic and the energy into finishing off our time in East Timor quickly changed, and it was about, right, okay, this has happened. The world's clearly changed. The war on terrorism is kicked off in a big way.
Yep.
So there was an energy, there was an anticipation of, okay, what's next?
And for you, were you one of the guys that came back for the initial stand-up of Tag East?
I wasn't a part of the original guys to go back. I had I'd made a pretty tough decision, but it was the right decision in terms of my family. Like, I was late by about 2 weeks into East Timor because my wife at the time had some personal stuff going on. So I guess I had to make that tough decision. Am I going to go back and then essentially be gone for another 12 months, or do I need to go back and support my family? And I chose to go back and support my family initially.
Which most people would do the exactly same thing. And then so you came, you squared away what you had to square away, and then the drum was beating that you deployed to Iraq in 2003. And
exactly.
What do you remember of this deployment in 2003?
So I was a team commander in Bravo Company in a Commando assault platoon, and we'd sort of got word. It was sort of like late November, December 2002 that there was going to be a deployment to Iraq of a special operations task group made up of a commando company and a SAS squadron. So we went on, a little bit of leave, and then basically it was just, come back, brief after brief, preparing for operations in Iraq, and I guess fighting for information on what our possible tasks were going to be as a commando company. Basically, it was about 4 to 6 weeks of preparation, equipment issues. We're going from an Australian summer into a Middle Eastern winter. So there was a lot of cold weather equipment being issued and sizes and all that sort of stuff. So we flew out of Sydney on Valentine's Day 2003.
Beautiful day.
Amazing, right? And flew into the Middle East and prepared for the Gulf War. Yeah.
And at that stage, like, you deployed with Bravo over there? So and was there much talk around you guys deploying to Afghanistan, or was that still the SAS, what they were doing and around that time?
I'm pretty sure there was probably some planning occurring, but Afghanistan just wasn't on our radar at the time. Like, we were fully focused. We were a fairly, a very experienced commando company. Most of the old school Bravo guys were still in and around Bravo. Some of those lads were forming TAG East, back in Australia, and doing all the specialist courses and maintaining those skills and getting certified, etc. So our focus was green roll, preparation in terms of operations in Iraq.
And how long were you over there for? Were you deployed in Iraq for?
We were there for about 3 months.
Yeah, okay.
And we were really given no timeline of how long we were going to be there. Whether it was because of we talk about the shock and awe of, the operations kicking off in Iraq and the fast success that coalition forces had in Iraq. I remember we were at Al-Assad airfield, and it was literally like the 8th of May by this time. We first deployed into February, so we're there for a couple of months doing some small jobs and some security and stuff, and then we got the job in Al-Assad airfield, and it was literally we had like a platoon plus of commandos at Al Assad at the time. And it was literally, we were given direction that, hey, you're flying back to our location in Jordan, and we'll likely be flying home in the next 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, right.
So 8th of May to getting that notification to being on an aircraft flying back to Sydney on the 16th of May.
Yeah, right. And so at that point where the regiment was there a bit of, because obviously only a few of you got to deploy to Iraq, and then was there a bit of a mass exit of guys that left the regiment and then came back later on?
Yeah, I think, I guess being a little bit more senior than I guess a lot of other guys, and some of those guys had been in for our commando for a period of time and not experiencing bigger army, there was disappointment, I guess, with what we tasks we were given in Iraq. I don't remember it being a big exodus, but yeah, sure, there was guys who were like, okay, this is not for me. Guys signed up for selection to go to Perth. Guys got out. The whole, I guess, private contractor gig was kicking off.
Chase the gravy train,
a lot of guys were like, yeah, I'm going to go and do that for 6, 12, 18, 2 years or whatever. But the good thing back then was like, and I think periods of time in the regiment history, like there's been an acceptance of guys wanting to go and do that contractor gig. The money was good. The jobs were obviously there. It was high risk though, and your capabilities weren't necessarily in place if something went wrong.
Yep.
But there was an acceptance that, no worries, go and do your private contractor stuff, go and earn some coin.
Get it out of your system.
But, sort of went without saying that we'll welcome you back because you're going to bring some quite unique skills back to the regiment.
Yep.
So that sort of was, 2003, 2004, 2005-ish.
Yep.
And then obviously Afghanistan kicked off for us. I think the first rotation was 2005, where I think a vehicle mounted platoon plus went into Afghanistan.
So for you at that stage, like the come back from Iraq and then still building capabilities of the unit at that stage, and had you at that stage had you rolled into Tag East at that point?
So I spent 2003, also 02, 03, 04 as a team commander in Bravo, and then into Tag East in 2005.
Yep.
But I was in a great platoon in those years. 03, 04 in Bravo Company. We were fully manned. A lot of the other companies were still building up, except for Charlie, who was sort of had the tag responsibilities at the time. Delta and Alpha was still, getting manning from the reinforcement cycle off, fresh commandos off the Rio and off selection. But we were doing parachute load follows, a lot of parachuting, a lot of A-mount, a lot of CQB, some really complex range practices, and just building the commando capability, from what it was sort of, I guess, prior to Iraq and in those early sort of 2000 days. Defence was starting to recognise our capabilities, so the budget was increasing. We had lots of resources. There was plans underway for a new range complex. There was plans underway for a whole new footprint of RHQ and battalion, company headquarters, and everything was going to be knocked down and basically rebuilt. So the cash was coming in, and there was cash going to Tag East. There was cash coming to us. So again, it was just like, and I don't know if it was my perspective because I'd been in the wider army and seen the lack of resources, the lack of all that sort of training and capabilities. Again, I was just frothing. Like I was just thriving in this environment of coming to work every day and just testing myself, testing my skills, testing the skills of my men, and just wanting to push those forward in terms of our capability as commandos.
Yeah, right. And at that stage too, because early days, it wasn't companies that were on tag east, was it? It was you trickle in guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So it wasn't a full company that would
No.
go in and be on tag.
So Charlie Company were basically took a lot of guys from, I guess most of the guys who came back from East Timor and then went on those initial courses to Perth. They formed the tag. So, snipers, and a land assault platoon, wateries doing their piece. So guys from Navy clearance divers doing the water, the tag water capability. So they held, and there was, obviously guys would trickle out and reinforce Bravo, and Bravo would trickle guys in to various positions, and there was guys who would go on promotion courses. So it was a trickle system at the time that was in place.
And without breaking security, is it as intense as being in combat, like being in a theatre on tag? Is it that high paced, high environment, like in an instant you can be called? It's
a different environment, but all those tag skill sets are extremely perishable.
Yeah, right.
And the guys are doing some extremely complex range practices. Your demolitions pieces, your CT driving, your CT sniping, all those things had to be maintained. So, but saying that, the structure and the working week that we put around that, so the guys could maintain their skills. We'd have individual skills days, team skills days, collective skills days, particular, you'd have a DEMS day, a CT day, CT drivers. They'd all go off in their little branches and practice their skills.
Yep.
And then they'd come together, for example, on a Wednesday or Thursday, and we'd do collective tag capability skills. So, and all those skills are extremely perishable. Like you've got to be, they're pushed to such a high limit, like your ability to identify friend or foe in those moments where you make entry to a room.
Yep.
Hard work, extremely perishable, needs a great deal of focus, needs a great deal of exposure, needs a great deal of repetition, because it's such a demanding environment to fight in.
Yeah, well, it's critical, isn't it?
Yeah, it's force of last resort. Government's force of last resort is tag east, tag west. There is no one else behind us.
Yep.
So it's a no-fail mission.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, it brought its own energy. It brought its own, and don't get me wrong, like no doubt, the guys on tag were looking down at us getting ready and in Afghanistan and war fighting we're doing. But we were doing the same thing. We're looking over the fence and what's the tag doing today? And, I can't wait to get up there. I can't wait to rotate in because it was, we were both, obviously part of Two Commando, but totally separate again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
They were in their lane and we were in our lane about green rolls war fighting. They were, it was black rolls and obviously some other pieces. But, again, it was a unique time, and I remember thinking back, because I'd done close to 10 years in Warrant peacetime.
Yep.
All of a sudden, I'm in this environment where you got Tag East, you've got operations getting ready, or we're in Afghanistan.
Yep.
We've got the unit developing. It was a exciting time to be part of history.
Yeah.
And no one knew that we were going to spend, we didn't know there was going to be another 19 rotations into Afghanistan. So we did 20 rotations into Afghanistan, from rotation 1 all the way through to rotation 20. No one knew it was going to last that long. So it was just, everyone was just frothing at the bit, maintaining your skills, making sure your personal life was squared away, focusing, get to work at 6:30 and you wouldn't leave till 6:30 in the afternoon because you wanted to be there.
Yeah. You
actually wanted to be at work. It was just such a great environment to be in, and there was so much capability development being invested in us, new tag facilities, as I was saying earlier, new regimental headquarters and just new weapon systems. It was just I'm living the dream. As a soldier, I'm living the dream.
And for you, we'll talk about the brotherhood, that only makes you guys get stronger, doesn't it? And can you, for people who have never been in the military or been a first responder, how important is that brotherhood?
Yeah, look, I can't express it enough, you know, what it means to be in that brotherhood. And, you know, it's not, the brotherhood isn't about, you know, you could not make contact. You know, I didn't know what the tag was doing. I didn't know what Delta was doing. I'm in my lane in whatever, command position or leadership position I'm in Bravo. But I knew at any time if I came across something I didn't know how to deal with or I needed some advice, I could pick up the phone. I could speak to Bram. I could speak to Reese. I could speak to H. I could speak to Nick, guys who are my peers, in and around. You just had, and the mess, as a senior NCO being in the mess, it was like, people don't realise that the gathering of senior NCOs in a mess is where we get most of our business done.
Yeah.
Because I'm so busy between 6 and 12 and 1:30 till 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. My time in the mess with my peers is where I get my business done. I can talk to them. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Can you help me out with this? Do you know this reference? Can you help me with a reference? I'm looking for a range reference or something.
Yep.
It's a unique brotherhood, and no doubt it was the same in the OR's mess, the other ranks mess.
Yep.
You can put everything down. You can go and share a meal, share a coffee, take the piss out of each other. One of the greatest things after being exposed to so much combat in my career was this thing called black humor, where most people don't understand, but it's just guys taking the piss out of guys because we've been faced with so much adversity, so much trauma, that you have these little jokes that people probably look at us and go, wow, man, like you've got some trouble there. Like you need to go and get some screening and see a psych and stuff. But you know what? It's just taking the edge off a shitty moment in life that sometimes you have no words for what you're confronted with. There are no words.
Yeah.
Like recovering bodies, after an IED explosion. That's a shitty, I can't even put it into words. But someone just takes the little bit of an edge off it, the frustration, the anger, with just sharing a little bit of black humor. Everyone's having a moment, everyone's reflecting, we're all looking at each other in the eye, and it's just like, fuck, this is shit. But it's just that ability. And it's like, it's like that reflection about being in the mess with your peers. It's just like that moment where we can just take the piss out of each other. I can go to someone from guidance. I can catch up with the RSM. I can catch up with the mess manager or whoever, the other CSMs, the other team commanders, the lads on tag, because, they were up at Luscombe Airfield. We were down the bottom parts of Holsworthy. So, but it was great because we all just moulded together.
Yeah.
A very, very unique time in history where the brotherhood, from old school Bravo, which I don't claim to be a part of. I was sort of on the back end of old school Bravo. But those guys, and again, I don't need to be in daily contact with them, monthly or even yearly contact with them now, but I can pick up the phone at any time and know they'll have my back.
Yeah.
It's like that saying we go on about, having your grab bag, with your passport, with some cash, with some warm kit, change of clothes. If one of my mates rings me, 30 seconds, mate, and I'm out the door and I'm booking a flight on my way to the airport, I'll be there for you.
Yeah.
And that's what the brotherhood is about.
And I was laughing because I know exactly what you're talking about with black humour, because we have it at work as well. Like emergency services, mate, we have it as well. And it's some people, like people who aren't in that, they're not in that world, or that it's, to them, they're like, that's weird. Like you guys shouldn't be saying things like that. And it's like, but that's our coping mechanism. That's how, exactly what you're saying, like pulling a body out of a car wreck and things like that. Like you have to have that, you sort of, in a sense, like you say, and I know exactly what you're saying, you've almost got to feel unempathetic when you do that. Like
absolutely.
It's sort of, you switch off to, because if you feel that emotion, that's when it gets
Well, it's distracting you from your job.
That's right.
Because I'm not only, recovering a body or something like that, but I'm also aware of the security situation that's unfolding around me.
Yeah.
But if I don't 100% focus on that, I'm letting my team down.
Yep.
And as SF guys, it's all about the team. It's all about team first. It's all about for the team, by the team, and I see lots of organisations, they talk and they preach brotherhood and teamwork, but when you've faced some life and death adversity, when you put trust in men to take life, preserve life, or save life, that's the cornerstone of the brotherhood.
Yeah.
Because I'm asking you to do some, pretty extreme things here that may be confronting, that may affect your mental health into the future. But that's the job we've been charged with.
Yeah.
I'm here for you 24/7, now, in the future, whatever.
So for you as a team commander, and how do you deal with the alpha male and different, and how do you as the leader control the egos?
Look, part of the SF fabric is this alpha male environment. It can be a strength, it can be a weakness, but it also can be something that can trip us up.
Yeah.
There's a fair share of alpha males within SO because, if we're not doing this job in Afghanistan, back to back and continual deployments, those alpha males, those guys who thrive, not survive in these environments, they would go elsewhere to look for that environment to thrive in.
Yep.
Because that's what makes us different to, and no disrespect for the RAR and what they've done. I went to Somalia in recon, and I've, some of the most treasured moments of my life is catching up with those lads a couple of weeks ago, and the 30 years Somalia reunion. But there's something different about us in that we've been selected, we've volunteered and we've been selected, we've been put through a selection course, we've been put through a reinforcement cycle that at any moment you can be removed. So alpha male and the topic of it, it's part of our fabric. As long as you as a team leader or someone in command knows how to manage those people, you can actually use them as a strength of your organisation. But it takes continual observation and management and oversight of those particular guys. And there's been a number of those guys in the regiment's history, and some of those guys are the reason why Two Commandos capability is world renowned now, because we've had those guys who were relentless in holding the standards and holding others accountable for their actions or inactions, is one of the reasons why we are held in such high regard.
And something that you said with the contract, holding accountability to that contract.
Yeah.
This is, day to day, you turn up and this is what you have to do.
It's not how good you did yesterday. Like, you were the best, DEMS operator, DEMS supervisor. Yesterday's gone, man. Yeah. Like, it's how you are today that counts. If you mess up today, I will hold you accountable in terms of your performance, because we are a national asset in terms of military and government's force of last resort in terms of our tactical assault group capabilities.
Yep.
We'll accept nothing less.
Yep.
And that's a line in the sand in terms of that daily renewal contract.
Yep.
You mess up, mate, I'm going to do everything I can to get you out of the unit, because you're damaging my reputation, the reputation I've invested 10, 15, 20 years in.
Yep. I
will not let that be tarnished.
No, and I think that's any good leader. That's your job. Like,
yeah, exactly right.
100%. And so let's talk about your first deployment in 2007 into Afghanistan, and what memories do you have of this deployment? Because you've got a few times you deployed to Afghanistan, but what do you remember of your first? Obviously, couple of incidents which we'll get into, What do you remember of your time on that?
I didn't actually go in 2007.
Oh, didn't you? Oh,
No,
sorry.
no.
I thought you did. Yeah.
No. I was in 2007. I was so I did a couple of years in tag, and then was promoted to warrant officer, and was posted to the Royal Military College.
Yep. What was that like for you?
Yeah, look, it was, again, like, I loved that environment of being able to influence and impart my knowledge on the officers of tomorrow. There's a lot of criticism about, the quality of officers that come out of the college, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the quality of instructors who can shape the end product of the officers who are going to lead our men and women in tomorrow's combat.
Yeah.
I had a great time. Like, my first 12 months, I was the CSM down at RMCA. So mainly looking after the reserve officer scheme. I had some really good mates, Mark Vitalik, Tim Applin, who were instructors up in first class.
Yep.
And so they would sort of, they would get me in to speak to, the class, or, we'd go field and, do you want to come out field with us? And, we'd do certain things. And because, again, I had, I guess a good reputation and some operational experience behind me, which they thought was of value. So, the class SIs were inviting me to come to the field or speak and stuff. So, and then my second year, I was fortunate enough to get a position as a small group instructor in first class, first class is their last 6 months before they graduate. So it's a really influential period of time in their careers, and there's a number of hoops they've got to jump through to obviously graduate. So again, like, it's a great environment. Living on the garrison at RMC was awesome. I could walk to work. The gym was there. My family was there. We had pool, and the mess environment was all very positive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, obviously, the regiment, as in 2 Commando, I was desperate to get back, and the guys were doing some stuff back in East Timor, and SOTG was cracking along, and then about halfway through 2007, I was basically told that I was going to finish my time early at RMC, and I was going to go with one of the companies as a watchkeeper. And a watchkeeper is like, you're essentially in the headquarters, and you're maintaining, obviously, an operational perspective on communications that are coming in and going, and making, I guess, headquarters decisions that would support the FE, the force element that was out in the field.
Yep.
And that was going to be, I think, a 4-month or a 5-month rotation into Afghanistan. I went on the mission rehearsal exercise with that force element, did all the preparation, and then I think it was about 4 weeks before I was supposed to basically finish my time at RMC and then go into Afghanistan, the RSM rang me and said, we've had a small change. You're actually going to go come back to the regiment as the company sergeant major of Bravo Company.
Yeah, right. And I was looking through my notes, and that's where I mixed up 2007 and 2009. And then, so you deploy. So now CSM, you deploy in 2009 to Afghanistan, and Afghanistan had been going a few years now. Were you part of what rotation was?
That was rotation 10, I believe.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, rotation 10.
And what was it at that stage? Did you just have Bushmasters coming in at that stage, or were you still in your Land Rovers at that point?
So I left RMC back end of 07, back to the regiment 2008, and obviously we had 12 months to prepare ourselves to go to Afghanistan in 2009. That was an awesome 12 months of training and getting the boys ready, and the reconstruction of Holsworthy, where our barracks was going to be, was underway. So all the companies were on the old Holsworthy playground in these donga type setups. Your headquarters was like It was like something you see on a mining site. You know, you're operating out of dongers and stuff. But we still had obviously the range complex up at Luscombe there, and the range complex had been, you know, the millions and millions of dollars that pumped into the new range complex was impressive. So it allowed us to, you know, hone our skills, you know, for likely operations in Afghanistan. So back to your question, we had Bushmasters for the company 2IC. So he had a vehicle which was a Bushmaster. I guess most of our supporting elements would be in another Bushmaster.
Yep.
So I think the whole company, we only had 3 Bushmasters that would roll out with us. And then there was, you know, basically about 50 or 60 SRVs, LRPVs for our mortars and stuff. Yeah, so we were in light-skinned vehicles in a high ID threat environment. So, yeah, I mean, guys would, you know, we had these armour plates that were like a, you know, size of an A4 sheet, maybe a little bit bigger. And you would strap them to your vehicle anywhere, you know, like on the floor, on the sides. So those SRVs, like, they were carrying way more than they should have. Like, you know, 50 cal Mark 19 ammo, your personal ammo, your sniper ammo, you know, mortar ammunition, 84 ammunition, plus all these armour plates, plus a 50 cal or a Mark 19, Mag 58. You know, it was just, these vehicles were, you know, the capability was pushed to the absolute limits of these vehicles. That's probably the best way to say.
And what do you remember of, and how long had you been in country before you had guys wounded and also killed?
Yeah, so we got our, I guess, boots on the ground complete in Afghanistan in Camp Russell at Tarankout. Sort of, was it like January or mid-February before the time the whole call sign was on the ground. We did a couple of shakedown patrols where elements of the company that was leaving would, you know, we called it a nursery patrol, where you go out, you know, get the lay of the land, you know, and then they would do a final handover. There was lots of briefs and, you know, in-country briefs and capability briefs and, you know, all that sort of stuff, which was about a 2 or 3 week period. And then we started posturing for essentially a company level operation, a disruption operation down in Helmand, in support of an operation that was happening out of Bastion. Yep. So we rolled out of the gates, sort of first week of or mid-March, I believe. Mid-March, we rolled out of the gates with 3 Bushmasters and I think it was probably about 60 or 70 SRVs and long-range patrol vehicles.
And in 2009, there's a famous photo of Cam Baird, Timmy Applin, who you've mentioned, and Merv. And was that when you were over there?
Yeah. So I was a CSM when that picture was taken, and the lad who actually there's a mirror image. There's actually 2 photos. So Cam, Merv, and Tim were obviously, Cam was the vehicle commander, and then the other lads in the other vehicle got the same similar photo. Yeah. You know, and obviously those Cam and Tim and Merv were killed in operations in Afghanistan over sort of a 2 or 3 year period in 3 separate incidents. You know, that's a stoic, unique photo
history,
that that needs to be recognised in Australian history. You know, I've heard some, you know, rumours that they want to hang it at in the Australian War Memorial, and it deserves nothing less, to be honest. Like, it's a, you know, as a veteran and an ex-member of, you know, 2 Commando Regiment, that picture, it's one of those pictures that tells 1,000 stories. every time I look at it and every time I see it come up and I've posted it a number of times on my social media and the history around that photo and the circumstances and the complex combat we were in at that time, it deserves nothing less to be hung in the Australian War Memorial. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's a fitting tribute to all three of those guys. And how did you deal with? So you were over there when Brett Till was killed.
Yeah.
And also you had Damien Tomlinson lose his legs and almost die himself. How did you, as the CSM, get the boys to stay staunch and sort of get them to keep mission focused and because obviously that was hard, like losing Brett and also what happened to Damo. As a leader, was that a real challenge for you?
Absolutely. It was probably the biggest challenge of my career. And I don't say that lightly at all. Like, nothing prepares you for death and dying. Nothing prepares you. Yeah, sure, we're conducting combat operations and, you steel yourself for these moments. We've rehearsed these. We've rock drilled them, rehearsal of concept. We've done everything to prepare ourselves. But nothing prepares you for a peer, a teammate, a member of your company being killed or being seriously injured. Like, I made a lot of mistakes during that period of time, and I've gone back and questioned things that I should have done and I didn't do, but I did do this, and at the time it was the best. I was doing my best, and it was an extremely challenging period of time, and I didn't deal with that very well, to be honest. Like, recovering Brett's body and the moments we shared before he was flown out of the field was. Moments I'll probably never forget, to be honest. Like, it was extremely emotional and trying to obviously, that was like day 4 or night of day 3, I think, of a protracted, 30 plus day operation in the field. So there was no time to mourn. There was no time to question. We just had to, and we were in the Shambrack Valley, which is, the night before that, Brett was killed like sort of early hours of that morning, and we basically had the company in Congo line with our SOA guys, so our engineer regiment guys, on foot, discovering IEDs almost like every 30 minutes.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, right.
And, defusing them or bypassing them or neutralizing them, or it was just, and the fear, like, we were coming across so many IEDs, you didn't dare get off your vehicle. Yeah. We went to the toilet off the vehicles. You wouldn't dare get off and walk off to the side. The IED threat was so high. We ate, we slept, we cooked on our vehicles for almost, it was like a 36-hour period getting through the Shambrack Valley so we could break down into the northern parts of the Helmand Valley of the actual the operational area we were supposed to move to. Brett was, when Brett was killed, that was an extremely testing time. Like, I reflected, and I did reflect on it, and, it was, a very traumatic time for myself, and, talking to, a lot of guys since then, and it's kind of good when you listen to other podcasts and guys are talking about that exact event.
Yep.
And I actually found it quite cathartic and quite healing to, hear different, there's about 3 or 4 guys who've spoken about that night and that morning, and hearing their perspective and what they were going through and what they saw and what their reaction was and what their inwards looking reaction was to what was happening on in company headquarters to get Brett's body firstly recovered and then out of the field. It's been a healing experience for me.
Yeah. And I guess for you at that time, just compartmentalise it, just compress it, put it away, mission focus, just keep doing the job, like keep doing your task at hand.
Yeah.
And it's only after when you come back that you can then process, I've actually lost a mate. And
yeah. It was hard. Like I was hurting, I was really, really hurting. And, I had fear going through my veins. I didn't want to let my team down. I didn't want to let the company down. It was, people talk about compartmentalizing. Yeah, just put it to the side and then deal with it. But I just couldn't. Yep. It was constantly on my mind. I found, I carried, I would write notes, and I've still got those diaries today, because I felt like I just had no one to turn to about the traumas I'd had exposed other members of the company to when we recovered Brett's body. Like that's, it sits heavy.
Yeah.
Like it sat with me heavy for a long, and I'm talking years.
Yeah.
I'm talking years here. Yeah. Like it sat heavy with me for a long period of time. And as I said, hearing other lads talk about the incident on podcast and reflecting with other men from the regiment, that's how I've managed to heal myself, with a lot of professional help as well, no doubt. But yeah, I was in the hurt locker massively.
And I can still, mate, and I thank you for sharing that, because I can see that it's still there now. Like I'm sitting
absolutely.
across from you, and I can see that. Like it's not and I thank you for sharing that. And then not too long after, you've got what happened to Tomo, and you must, like, the hurt locker that you were already in over Brett, and then now.
It was a sense of here we go again. Like the traumatic injuries that Tomo suffered that night. He probably shouldn't be here today, to be honest.
Yeah.
But in saying that, the skill of the first aiders, the team combat first aiders, that operation, because it was such an extended period of time, and we were so isolated in the Helmand Valley. Part of the FE was a doctor and a senior medic at company headquarters. And then obviously within each team there's a combat first aider as well, and these guys have honed their skills in combat and in training, so they're operating at extremely proficient high levels. And a guy that we both know, Mick Slattery, has nothing but respect for Mick. Like he's just such a competent operator, and just led that combat first aid capability forward relentlessly in the unit. And he no doubt trained and influenced a lot of guys who saved a lot of guys' lives in combat, that we don't hear about every day on the news, gunshot wounds or various injuries. Mick held that capability and drove it forward relentlessly in the pursuit of professionalism. So yeah, Damo was in a lot of trouble that night. The company was we're in three different sort of I guess the company headquarters was off the actual feature in an overwatch position with another commando platoon. We had mortars with us, and then we had two commando assault platoons, I guess, forward, doing the tasks that we were doing in Helmand, in Helmand Valley at the time. And then obviously Damo's vehicle ran over an IED. Three lads in the vehicle, including Damien, were basically obviously thrown clear of the vehicle. The other two lads, we call them minor injuries, but to be an explosion of that nature is traumatic in itself. Damo obviously suffered, lost both his legs. His facial, sternum, arm injuries were just horrific.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely horrific. And at night, in that hostile environment, you know, there was a lot of brave men.
And one of them, who would ultimately pass away the next year, Scotty Palmer, and you're good friends with his dad, Ray, and that's the flip coin of saving one of your comrades and then losing your life in the way that Scott lost his life in the helicopter accident the following year. Just that, you know.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre theory to think about in terms of, Scotty was the first medic on site that night, and the medics, the doc, they worked tirelessly to stabilise Damo for Kazovac. And we talk about the golden hour to get a guy out of the field who's in such bad way. I think from the time of the explosion, we had a helo on the ground in about 58 minutes.
Wow.
To get him out of the field. And, the doc, the medics, they just, went above and beyond that night, to be honest. Yeah.
And did you, at that stage, with the going off the IED, did you think, all right, we're going to get ambushed now? The Taliban are going to have a go at us. They're going to come in and
yeah.
Or was it? Did they have a go at you?
They didn't. They obviously knew that we were in and about because we'd conducted some fairly intense combat operations the days preceding to that.
Yeah.
Helmand Valley, if you can picture, it's like Lake George before it had water in it.
Yeah.
Or before it's just literally Helmand Valley is literally a bowling green, 3 to 5 kilometres, sometimes 10 kilometres wide, with these massive ranges on either side. So their ability to spot us through their spotting network and passing information through their ICOMs was pretty robust. They knew what we were doing. They've been doing these types of combat operations for predating the Russians when the Russians tried to invade in 60s, 70s, 50s.
Yep.
So they know what they're doing. They would IED most high ground observation points or likely routes that, a force could go up. And Damo unfortunately ran over one of those. We didn't receive any fire that night, so it wasn't like we know where they are now, let's go in and ambush these guys. We held combat superiority down there. We had assets in the air. We had, mortars. We had snipers. We had some fairly robust combat, enablers to support us in the field. So, for them to want to take us on would be a pretty big call.
Yeah, right.
Even the day before that happened with Tomo, we met up with some Marine ODA guys, so Operation Detachment Alpha guys. So they're like SF lads who were, these guys operate in groups of 10. They're gunned up to the teeth. They're in small teams, but they operate in isolation, and their job is to, obviously to recruit locals who would either provide information or, other tasks they do as well. So we met up with these guys, and they had so many assets banked up in terms of enhancing their survivability. We felt pretty safe and secure where we were, to be honest.
I know I've spoken to a couple of other operators, and they said Helmand was just that province that they were mad. They were fanatical fighters, and it was
Helmand Valley at the time was probably the most dangerous place in the world.
Really?
Yeah, right. That was their safe haven. Yeah, right. We were driving a barb into a hornet's nest essentially, and waiting for a reaction and wanting a reaction, because that was part of our task. Our mission to be down there was to create distraction to support other operations.
Yeah, okay.
So we were literally driving in their backyard, setting up camp. Here we are. Come and take us home.
Taking the fight to them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And as you say, stirring the hornet's nest, like going in and just going, yep.
Absolutely.
We're here. Yeah, right.
Yeah, and we had, as I said, we had phenomenal combat enablers in and around us. So,
yep. Yeah, right.
It was pretty cool.
And so then that was early on in the deployment that you had Brett, and then was it after that no more KIAs at that time when you were over there, or?
No, not on that deployment. We had another vehicle, funny enough, on that same operation that ran over an IED.
Oh right,
a Bushmaster.
Yep.
Which it was the company 2IC's, the XO's vehicle. So the vehicles, Helmand's so isolated, you're so far away from everything that to get an asset out to recover that vehicle it's not going to happen. So we basically strip everything off that vehicle. We call in a fast mover, a jet, and he drops a bomb on it and destroys it.
And were you looking back? Were you and reflecting now, just proud of the guys and how with everything that had happened down with Brett and also Tomo, and how they just came together and the comradeship, and then still staying mission focused, and then being able to just continue on with the job of what you do as warfighters?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, it's part of that brotherhood, where we're in this environment, we're looking after each other. We push each other hard because we need to, in terms of our survivability in places like Helmand, where you make the smallest mistake, you're going to pay for it. Again, there was we obviously evacuated Tomo, and we were getting updates the next day, and obviously we recovered his vehicle, and then we had to position the vehicle so it could be destroyed, by a fast mover, and evacuating the two lads in his vehicle. I think we evacuated the vehicle commander, Tim, but the other lads stayed in the field. So yeah, there was lots of that next day. There was lots going on, and again, we were tired, we were fatigued, but the boys are poised, and I won't say that we were siege mentality in terms of there was a steely feel about us. We still had another 10 or 12 days of operations, actually probably longer, about 20 days of operations in front of us, and the subsequent operations that we conducted after Brett and after Damo's incident, we did well.
Yeah.
It's probably the easiest way.
Yeah, it's and
the boys were focused
without going into security. Yeah. No, I totally get it. And mate, we've mentioned some names in the regiment: Cam Baird, Brett Wood, and recently, and you mentioned Nick Hill, and recently, tragically, Nick passed away, and Cam, and what memories can you share of your time with Cam Baird, and that people might not know?
Yeah, Cam was a very unique character. It's interesting. It's sort of obviously Cam, Victoria Cross Medal of Gallantry, and the personality becomes bigger post those events. But every day with Cam, he was a big human. He was a big man, and he had a great reputation as a ultimate professional. Myself and my boss at the time, we promoted Cam before we went back to Afghanistan. So he was in a Lance Corporal position in the deployment with myself. Just the ultimate professional. He minimal fuss. He wasn't the type of guy who was after the fruit and the bling, and he just had the basic equipment. Like we mentioned earlier, he was probably the only one in the company who didn't paint his weapon, and but he was just the ultimate professional. Like, I shared some good moments with Cam, and I had the opportunity to share some of Cam's experiences. I did Trek for Vets on Anzac Day this past Anzac Day, and a good mate of mine, Trevor O'Brien, we both got to reflect on what Anzac Day meant to us before our time of service, during and after.
Yep.
So we shared those moments with the 40-odd people we had with us. And then I shared some of my experiences with Cam, because I was surprised when I asked, like, is there anyone who doesn't know who Cam Baird is, VCMG? Yep. To my surprise, there was probably 6 or 7 people in that crowd of 40 who didn't know who Cam was. Right. And again, there's people who follow the military, there's people who don't. It's not a disrespect to them or to Cam, if someone doesn't know who he is. But so I definitely took the time to share some stories with Cam and in combat and training and his time in the regiment. But nothing but good memories with Cam, and from Iraq and his time when he got out, and him coming back, and then coming back to Bravo Company, and then the legend of the man that we know today, and from his operation, his conduct, prior to when he was killed and won the Victoria Cross. I feel in a unique position, and I feel privileged to have witnessed that. So
and his death would have come as a shock to you, like all the guys, like as we mentioned, Scotty, Merv, that famous the photo, Timmy Applin, like that would have, and Brett Wood,
yeah, they all come as a shock. Like it's almost like at times you become expectant, because we're sending men to combat. Afghanistan is the most complex environment to be in. And as I said, I feel privileged to have known, all those guys who we lost in Afghanistan. The 12 guys from 2 Commando Regiment. Blaine from SASR. Good friends. We spent time together in recon in 1RA, myself and Blaine, and in Somalia and stuff. And he was an absolute larrikin, but again, just tragic loss of life, and it cuts short, and it cuts you, like, obviously recently with Nick.
Yeah, if you can share some.
Yeah, so again, Nick was just that guy who was. He would probably be offended if you said, mate, there's a bit of alpha male in you, but it was out of respect, because he was relentless and ruthless. If you did something wrong, he would come down on you on a ton of bricks. Warranted discipline, you made a mistake, mate. Like, that's not acceptable.
Yep.
And I witnessed a number of these conversations that Nick would have with people who weren't, maintaining the standards that the regiment had set and was setting, and we look back now, 15 plus years in Afghanistan, Iraq, East Timor, pre and post Afghanistan. Like, it's the reason why men like Nick is the reason why the regiment, 2 Commando Regiment, has the world-renowned reputation as a direct action special forces, hardened through 15 plus years of combat. And sometimes I think, we rose to success, but it was warranted so quickly. And it's probably why units are threatened by us, because we forged that reputation in combat. There's no other more unforgiving testing environment to forge your reputation in combat in Afghanistan.
Well, I think too, and it hit me really hard, and that's why I wanted to bring Nick up, because he become a brother to me, and you worked with him, and I want to ask you this, because I think it's a really key point you touch on. when you first joined the regiment, did you foresee that it'd get to the world class of capability that it is now? Like, did you when you first joined the regiment, did you think that it would, and the rapid growth in, like obviously you just mentioned the hard years, but did you, looking back when you first started to when you left, of how much it had grown in that time? Did you ever think that?
I think, to be honest, knowing the men that were around us at that time, like when I passed selection and got through my Rio, and you could sort of look around and, OR's mess, sergeant's mess, officer's mess, whatever, and the calibre of men that were involved and were pushing our capabilities forward, the leadership we had in place at the time, success was always going to come. I'd never envisaged that success was going to be fast-tracked. We had this conduit of combat in Afghanistan to facilitate that. Do you know what I mean? And that's not taking away any capabilities from any other units in SO Command. But we had some absolute thrusters who lived and breathed our capability, and their willingness to pursue excellence was without peer.
Well, you've mentioned a lot, and you were part of that as well. That you've mentioned a lot that unfortunately aren't with us now, and
the Pete Caifes, the Nick Hills, the Ian Turners, guys who died of suicide, because of their traumatic exposure in Afghanistan and personal stuff, I guess. But you can look back, and the calibre of men that were pushing that capability forward, it was without peer.
Absolutely.
We were, and you could feel that camaraderie building from the moment you finished Rio, day one in your commando company, and I was privileged to welcome guys to my company in 2009. The likes of Tim, Merv, all those guys were straight off Rio into my company.
Yeah.
We had 6 or 7 months of preparation, and we're going warfighting, men. I hope you've got your stuff in one sock, so to speak, because it's we're on here.
Yeah, it's like you said.
Ian, Todd Langley's, I saw Todd come through as a young Rio, and he was my patrol 2IC in 1RR. The pride I felt seeing, Langers get through selection was like, my heart was out of my chest, Killed in operations, but doing what Langers loved doing, There's a funny story about Langers. He never made his own coffees. We're out, in the field, and I remember this back to 1RR, and then, he obviously carried the same reputation. Morning routine, most guys, one of the first things they'll do is, light their jet boil or their Hexia, whatever they're doing at the moment, get a coffee on, get the hot water on, and then you do your rest of your stuff, right? Concurrent activity.
Yep.
Hot water's on, cleaning my weapon, looking after my teammates, putting food on for my teammates, preparing, looking after everyone else, but I've got my hot water on, so it's okay. I'm going to be okay. I've got a coffee. So Langer's never made his own coffees. He would eat and look after his team and do that thing, but then he'd cruise around the harbour or the facilities that were in at the time, and he would taste everyone else's coffees. So he'd get 10 or 15 sips, and he didn't need to make his own coffee. So, but that was Langer's. He was a unique character who upheld the standards of a commando. To the greatest, to the highest standard, but was an absolute character.
Yeah.
Absolute character.
And mate, you remember them all now, and as you say, when you sort of expecting and doing what the commandos do, you were the tip of the spear, and the guys. I've only heard stories of Langers, and he was doing what he taking the fight to the enemy. Cam, same thing, taking the fight to the enemy, doing what commandos do, and being that, kicking in the door, and we're here to fuck shit up and so, and you remember them all, mate. And for you come back from Afghanistan and then you rotate onto a secondment for 3 years with the Australian Federal Police in the terrorist sort of
the counter-terrorism portfolio.
Yeah, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was quite confronting. Like I'd come back from operations in Afghanistan where we're war fighting at the highest level. Complex operations, SF operations, direct actions. You've got so many enablers. You're out there with your men to being posted to the Australian Federal Police headquarters at Barton here in Canberra. I'm out of uniform. I'm working in an office. It was really confronting because I was the first in the seat. In a counter-terrorism. In the counter-terrorism space, if we're going to exercise, we would exchange LOs, so liaison officers. So someone from AFP counter-terrorism would come and sit with whatever force was leading the exercise, SASR, TAG East, TAG West, 2 Commando, SOHQ, Special Operations Headquarters. We'd exchange LOs, but there was that loss of passage of information in between exercises where, it was comms black, there's no comms. So 2 Commando had managed to raise a position and have a permanent LO, a senior NCO. I was a warrant officer at the time. Go and work from the Australian Federal Police counter-terrorism portfolio in the headquarters at Barton. So day one, it was I had no restricted or secret means of communication out. There was no email networks. There was no safe voice, secret level phones. So I had to fight for everything. But I tell you what, it was an amazing, eye-opening experience when I sort of got to a snapshot of understanding how we're taking the fight to terrorism here in Australia through our capabilities, through our networks, through other government agencies, really broadened me in terms of the CT, the counter-terrorism space here in Australia. I was influencing and having parts in, CT investigations, kinetic and non-kinetic. So I had a fantastic 3 years, and I was really proud from day one to the end of my tenure there as the solo, where, starting from nothing on day one to the networks, the intergovernment agency points of contact I'd established to support special operations in the fight of counter-terrorism. So fantastic, unique experience. And I'm really proud of the guys who took the job up after me and since then. So yeah, great time in my career.
And then, so you then deploy again, but after 27 years, you call time on your career, and 17 of those in 2 Commando. And how was your transition? And was that a really hard time? Because 17, you joined.
Yeah.
It's all you'd known, and coming into back to being a civilian, starting as a civilian, and then coming back. How was that transition for you?
Yeah. Back end of 2016, my mental health was really deteriorating. I took some time out, and SOH. I was posted to Special Operations Headquarters at the time. Afforded me some downtime. And then I quickly realised that it was likely that I was going to be medically discharged. So it's a strange, because I had aspirations to go back to the regiment, as the RSM, and trying to fight my mental health issues, trying to make sure I leant forward and was looking after myself and my family and whatnot. But it essentially came down to I remember one day I was at the medical centre at RMC, and the writing was on the wall, and I was told I was going to be medically discharged. So that in itself was extremely confronting. I had aspirations, as I said, to go back to Commando, and then I gotta like get this around my head. And about 8 months later, I was medically discharged, January 2017. So transitioning after doing living and breathing the military and special operations for 27 years was confronting, and lots of people talk about loss of identity, but it's actually true, because I'd forged a career as this this operator, this soldier, for that period of time, and then to have to go, okay, what's Ant going to do now? I was fortunate that I guess I suffered badly. My mental health suffered badly, but my mindset was to heal and to go again.
Yep.
What that go again was going to be, I didn't really know, but that was my mindset.
And then you found purpose again, and it took some time. And then you got into work with the Canberra Raiders, which is what you're doing now. How did this come about, and what's the role that you have with the Canberra Raiders?
Yeah, so I got into the fitness industry once I got out, and found a methodology of fitness called CrossFit, and I love it still to this day. I still train, and it really gave me some identity again. It gave me a community to be in and around, and it was a great methodology, and I recommend it to everyone and anyone to try it. So I spent sort of 3 or 4 years in the fitness industry, doing CrossFit, and then getting qualified to be a CrossFit coach, running sort of my own sort of PT on the side. Because I was out now, and then starting to do a little bit of mentoring in terms of, I guess, leadership, through social media, like guys who were going on selection. Hey, how do I prepare? What can I do? What programs can I do? What's out there? Give me, can you help me out? So that was, a bit of a self-licking ice cream on the side, for want of a better term, I suppose. But I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I still felt I could value add to guys going in, and in actual fact, I still felt like I could value add to SOCOMMAND. But through the restrictions of a medical discharge, it's very, very. In fact, there's no limitations. There's nothing you can really do to value add, apart from I chose this mentoring path, because the command had never done anything wrong by me. I will always be loyal and thankful for my time in 2 Commando, in SOHQ and in Special Operations here in Australia. I'm extremely loyal, to the point where at times I get passionate, and I would confront someone about their own journey and their, I guess, not necessarily accurate portrayal of what they were exposed to from my point of view.
Yeah.
So the Raiders gig really came out of left field. Like a friend of mine, Brett, he works in the football department at the Raiders, and another friend of mine, Trevor, who works in the mines now in Perth. I did selection with Trevor, and he's been out for a number of years now, but works in the mines, doing comms and stuff, IT and whatever else he does. So I guess the Raiders and Ricky himself, he has a real passion for how we do things in the military. We're solution focused. We lean forward in terms of finding solutions for problems. We plan well. We communicate well. We have good values. He really froths over that and wanted some for his team, the Canberra Raiders. So there was about 12 months where they were trying to establish a relationship with 2 Commando Regiment. Through the regiment's obviously busy, day to day, week to week, month to month, etc. There was some exchanges, but Ricky sort of, I guess, wanted someone, more permanent. Trev spoke to Brett, who's in the football department at the Raiders, and basically connected together. Hey, there's this guy named Ant who lives in Canberra. This is his background. Give him a call. So I'd had a couple of conversations with Brett, and then pretty much just got a cold phone call from Ricky and said, hey, come and have some breakfast and we'll have a chat. And I might have some work and some opportunities for you. And for me, I was blown away. Like I've been a Canberra Raiders supporter since I can remember. I've grown up idolising, these guys I'm working with today. They're my heroes. In a football sense.
Bit of starstruck.
Exactly right. Absolutely. Yeah, like I'm sitting having breakfast with Ricky, but we're, as much as I know Ricky now, we're very similar. Like we're passionate about performance. We're passionate about leadership. He's extremely passionate about investing in the Canberra Raiders football team, and
well, you only have to
wears his heart on his sleeve. But he's a great person and man and family man.
Well, the other day, mate, you only have to look that he rested Jared Croker for his 300 that he said he deserved that game back in Canberra, and that's leadership. That's leadership, and
that's taking a risk for the betterment of our fans. And for Jared to have that experience in front of our home crowd, he deserved nothing less.
And Ricky got smashed by the press, and absolutely, and I just. Regardless of what you think of Ricky Stewart, I admire him. Like he's passionate, wears his heart. That's leadership from the front. Like,
absolutely.
And the way he came out in the press conference and said, "I knew I was going to get smashed by yous," and this, and it was just absolutely fitting to see that he absolutely gave Jared that. That, and then the fans. The main thing was the fans. And he didn't matter about the result of the week before. It was giving that to someone who's given his all for that club.
Yes,
absolutely, and that's
deserve nothing less. To be honest, so
I see it in the sense from sitting across from you. I can see similarities. Absolutely, you're passionate. And mate, it's. When you get passionate about things, it's like you get told you're like a dog with a bone. And I'm the same. Like especially like if I want to get you on the podcast, I'll find a time. Like whenever it works, whenever it's like it'll just be at the perfect opportunity. It'll happen and be a dog with a bone. And it's I think that's how you got to attack life. I
Absolutely.
think that's like, and it's something you said to me earlier that is. You sort of I don't believe in luck, but I believe you forge your own destiny. And you, it's opportunity. Like people say, oh, you're so lucky, and it's like no, it's not luck. It's hard work.
That's exactly right.
Looking back on your career, it's all hard work, mate. Like going.
I mean, everything I learned about leadership is through my courses in the military and life leadership lessons. Like I haven't studied leadership. Post-grad, anything like that. But I'll study leaders and I froth over human performance. So all my leadership theories and principles and values, they're all life lessons. They're all life exposures through combat, through sport. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do for the Raiders, mentoring the senior leadership group and our emerging leadership group. It's a different leadership problem, but you can build the same values and the same leadership systems in and around it with some change. Because it's, like we chatted earlier, it's not combat, but it's that same mindset which forges good leadership and I love bringing my mentoring to the Raiders in that leadership position. It's really good, and I've got a great bunch of guys I work with, and again, I grew up idolising most of these lads, and the fact I can sit down and have good, deep, meaningful conversations with these lads and impart my knowledge about leadership, I love it and I froth over it. The other thing I do is performance breathing. where, and again, I haven't done any postgraduate breathing courses. It's just my own experiences from being a soldier, being an operator, how to control anxiety, to feed oxygen to the brain, which facilitates better decision making. And it's as simple as that. It's not a black art. Sure, there's intricacies and there's ways I manage it through the Raiders and impart that knowledge, and there's techniques that we use. But again, it's about human performance, and it's about me delivering through my knowledge, whether it's leadership or whether it's through my human performance understanding of how I managed anxiety, imparting that knowledge onto the boys so they can be better athletes, better footballers, better fathers, and better performance for the Canberra Raiders.
And mentorship, like you said.
Yeah.
You had some great mentors of leaders through your time, and now it's gone like full circle. You're passing it on to, not in a military perspective, but in a civilian perspective now.
Yeah.
You've gone like that full circle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing work that you're doing, and hopefully, mate, they can rise a little bit higher for you in the ladder. So
yeah. And look, it's the power of storytelling, it's obviously there's lots of podcasts out there, but the better ones, they really find that message of, the power of storytelling. It's such a powerful medium to use in terms of healing, in terms of communication, in terms of improving your ability to communicate, man on man, man on woman, whatever the audience is, one-on-one or with an audience in front of you. There's so many powerful aspects to it. And I try and, guys who are struggling, my former peers, I'm like, mate, just write some stuff, get yourself a social media account, tell your stories, sit around the fire with a bunch of mates and tell stories of your past and things you did well, things you didn't do well. If you had to do that again, what would you do differently?
Yep.
It's such a power. It doesn't have to be on social media or on a podcast. If you're in that way where you're really struggling with your mental health,
just journal it.
Just journal.
Yeah.
Like the powerful input you get from journaling, it's not the journaling you're doing today that's going to help you. It's when you reflect 6 months ago and go, well, I was really struggling back then, but look at me now, look at my journey through words, how my mental health is today. It's a really solid coping mechanism and path to heal through mental health or anxiety or all those things that fall under that umbrella.
I 100% agree with you, because I've spoken to you off air about my suicide attempt and my lows and my struggles, and it's been journaling, and my journaling turned into a book, so that is going to be released in January.
That's awesome.
And it's like, I know exactly what you're saying. It's through just, if one person picks up my book and they, it helps them in some way, then it's all been worth it. And, that's, and 100% the power of, doing podcasts and sharing. And, we've only got to look recently with the loss of Nick, and we were just so lucky that we were able to capture Nick's memories and his story. That that's now something held for the test of time. That's in history now.
Well, and it's also, that's a snapshot for his family.
That's right.
That's him telling his career story.
Yep.
Which now that he's passed, it's like you can't put a value on that.
No.
Like the podcast I did with Mark Smethurst a couple of years ago, the gratitude he expressed to me afterwards, because it was a snapshot of his career.
Yep.
And parts of that his kids and his wife didn't even know about.
Yeah. Yep.
Whereas they can now reflect and hear their dad's story. And it's going to be the same for Nick. He's a granddad. He's a husband. He's got his own kids. His close family, his mates. They now have this snapshot of Nick. Low moments, or when they're seeking moments of inspiration, or when they just want to hear his voice.
Yeah.
They can now turn that on and go, there's Nick, he's talking to me. It's okay.
And I had that with his mum recently. I had that where she listened to the podcast and she said to say thank you, and that, and you know, you and I have spoken about it. It cuts
It's powerful.
It cuts
it's a
me
powerful
up. Like
moment.
it's, you know, and you just think I'm just grateful that I had the opportunity and the privilege, because it is a privilege, mate, to sit across from you and share your stories. And I don't ever take that for granted, that it's, you know, it's an honour and a privilege to sit across from you guys and get the trust that you share with me to share your story. That's
Absolutely.
something that I'm absolutely privileged and honoured to do. And it's a rarity. People don't, you know, and it's a hard thing, and you know that too. It's trusting someone to share your story. Mate, I hold it, and I thank you for, you know, trusting me to share your story. And
Absolutely.
it's, so we're getting towards the end now, and looking back now, mate, and knowing what and everything you've been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
I don't know if he'd listen. Look, you know, a lot of people say, you know, if they could have their time over again, they wouldn't change anything. There are aspects of my life, aspects of my personal life, you know, I would do differently. You know, I made some mistakes that affected my family. So, yeah, absolutely, there are things I would change. Advice I would give to myself as an 18-year-old would be to, and we've sort of, I've brought this up a couple of times, is I think life and the pursuit of excellence or pursuit of performance or just surviving, whatever that is for you as an individual, for me, it's about whatever it is, put yourself in the mindset that you want to thrive and not just survive. Because with that becomes a whole mindset of challenging yourself every day.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's, you know, whatever your work is, just put yourself in that mindset that, you know, I want to be happy in my space. I want to be challenging myself. I want to be energized to go to work. I want to be someone that people can turn to and ask those difficult questions, or myself, you know, having the moral courage to have difficult conversations at times, as opposed to sitting in the background and rumors and innuendo. So thrive, don't survive, and be honest with yourself.
So looking back now, mate, with everything, and was joining the army the best decision you ever made in your life?
Yes. Yeah. Look, you know, that's a really hard question to answer. Where would you be if you didn't join the army? Because I don't, you know, who knows? Like, I guess 27 years, you know, lots of combat deployments, combat operations in, you know, Afghanistan, Iraq, East Timor, Somalia, Bougainville.
Yeah, we've only touched on, like, we could...
like, you know, we could sit here for hours.
Yeah.
But I feel lucky isn't the right word. You know, people before me had nothing but peacetime in their careers, right? It's always, you know, you don't wish for those military combat situations, but I feel privileged, and I feel a sense of responsibility to pass on what I've learned through my time in combat, through my time, you know, as a son, as a father, as a husband, as a partner. I feel a sense of duty that, you know, I've still got value and knowledge to pass on, and it's the old cliche, if it helps one person, you know, I can rest and, you know, put my slippers on and go to bed at night.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I feel lucky that I've had those exposures, but I also feel a sense of duty to pass those on.
Absolutely. And What are your plans going into the future, and how do people follow you and get in contact with you?
Ant Platter on Instagram. My Instagram's there. The future, look, the football industry is quite fickle. You know, a coach leaves, you know, generally staff will be moved on as well. You know, I could stay here forever and work with the Raiders. I feel privileged and honoured to be able to work with those lads and the team and the whole football staff, the administration staff, guys and the girls in that place is amazing. You know, I do have aspirations to, you know, move north and, you know, buy some land and live in a warmer climate. So, yeah, you know, next 1 to 2 to 3 years, you know, hopefully to put that action into place. But, you know, I hope to be involved with the Raiders for a long time to come, yeah.
Mate, I'm glad, and that's how I reached out to you, and yeah, I love seeing what you do with the Raiders and also what you do in your life. And mate, I'm gonna finish with there's a quote that I believe sums you up, and you've served your country with honour and brought pride to your family. Your story is one of true grit, determination, and having the courage to be brave and test yourself. The quote is, "Bravery is being the one who knows you're afraid. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. Motivation is the art of getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. Perseverance is the hard work you do after you get tired of doing the hard work that you already did." And I believe this sums your story up, and I want to thank you for your service to our country. Thank you for what you do for veterans. Thank you for what you do for first responders. And it's been an absolute honour and a privilege to have you on True Blue Conversations. Thanks, Ant.
Thanks, man. Very kind words. It's been an honour and privilege to speak to you today. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Blum. See you on the front line.